Hello and welcome to this final tutor review video for the course Understanding Language, Learning and Teaching from the University of Southampton and the British Council. I am Kate Borthwick and I was the original course designer for this course a long time ago, and I'm one of the tutors on this run of the course alongside Josh and Joe. Now this week we have been considering global English, or should I say global Englishes, and English as a lingua franca. Now every time we run the course, this particular week generates a lot of discussion and sometimes a lot of argument, and this time has been no different. So thank you for your lively comments and for sharing your experiences. Many of you spoke about very personal experiences of either learning English or teaching English and the different contexts that you teach and you learn in. And certainly teaching, that's one of the themes that has come out of this week. Certainly there is a distinction between the academic study of English and English as a lingua franca and the spread of English, and then the reality of the classroom. And so while you might think that using different kinds of Englishes reflects a picture of how we communicate in a kind of academic sense of observing the world, I think many of you asked this week, how can this guide us as teachers? How can this help us understand how to teach English better in a practical sense? What do we teach? And certainly Kelly P made the point that using different kinds of English can be confusing in itself in a multilingual environment, suggesting that the power of the L1, or the language that you speak as a native speaker, can hinder communication to an excessive degree sometimes, and we have to be careful with that. And what do you think about that? Certainly, if you would like to contribute to that discussion, please do so, and I'll put the link below this video. I mean, I think certainly Kelly has a point here, and communication is really the key, as many of you said in the course. The notion of any lingua franca, it's something that helps us to communicate and get across our message in however a broken way or a non-native speaker way that you can. And so that idea of speaking good English, or what some people might consider good or correct English, actually is not important. The idea is how you communicate and how you communicate with each other. Constantia suggested we do need some kind of standard though, for intelligibility, if nothing else. So, how do we understand each other? What do we teach if there is no standard at all? And that idea of standards is very controversial in ELF research. And I think Professor Jenkins would ask, whose standards? What standards? How do you decide what standards you set? And who decides? And a lot of you raised that point. And certainly some of you said you have no answer to that. And I think we're used to people suggesting answers. Certainly some people in the media, some newspapers suggest a certain way of English, and other people suggest something different. And that question of ownership of English, I think, causes much debate and frankly a lot of fighting. Many British English speakers would say that British English is a standard, whereas Americans would say American English was. So I think you start to see that even native speaker Englishes don't have an agreement on this, and that multilingual franca status in native speaker versions of English exists. So if that's the case, why shouldn't Chinglish or Germanish or any other lish also have status, as well as British English, American English, Australian English? Which is the right one, and which is better? Who can say? Surely status should be related to the realities of how we use language today, and not by its origins. And if you start to say, well, British English is better, American English is better, you start thinking about history, don't you? And where something has come from. So these are very controversial ideas, and people disagree on it. And so tell us what you think, if you haven't done so already, because many of you have. So on the issue of whether the spread of English was a good or a bad thing, you were pretty divided. So we had Uziel saying English was a murderous language, and some researchers certainly characterise it that way. Languages evolve and change, they are living things, and so they can move and displace other languages, and so in that context they can be seen as killers. However, some of you disagreed with that picture of English, and certainly Sharif, I think it was Sharif, for one, saw the spread of English as a good thing, because a lingua franca is a useful thing to help us communicate in our increasingly global lives. Although he also pointed out that knowing just one language could be detrimental, and that learning languages broadens your world, and so by learning a language you are enriching yourself. And I love that idea, and I totally agree with you, Sharif. Learning languages certainly enriches who you are as a person. And certainly it's something that we find in the UK. The study of languages has declined over time, and I think that's an enormous shame. The study of language gives you a study of culture, cultural awareness, and understanding of other people. It's a wonderful thing to do to learn a language. Okay, so another big topic of conversation was native speaker teachers versus non-native speaker teachers. And many of you commented that it wasn't important whether you were a native speaker or not, but it was your teaching ability that was the most important thing. However, Simon shared his experience, thank you Simon, that he says he gets to work as a language teacher precisely by saying he was a native speaker. So I think Simon said he had one-to-one classes and things like that. And so I think the real world is that often you do see adverts, don't you, saying we want native speakers, we'd like to, or take lessons with me, I am a native speaker. And I think this is another example of where the real world makes a kind of decision for us on language status. You might almost say it's the market value of a language that decides its status. And certainly I think you can make arguments like that around English. It's very ingrained in us, I think, that a native speaker is the best person to learn from. And I think we feel that, even if we know they may not be the best teacher in the world. There is this kind of idea in our head that a native speaker will give us classic pronunciation, classic grammar, classic ways of speaking. It's something that's very ingrained. But what do you think? I've put on the bottom of the step links to some of the discussions that I've mentioned, some of the ideas, and certainly keep going back to the content this week because it will change as people put comments on, and certainly the poll in the course where we talk about what we think about the future of English and attitudes to ELF, you'll see the results to that changing too. So keep going back and having a look and seeing how those answers update. So I think I need to come to an end now. And I'm going to end on a positive note from Bronwyn, who said that this week thinking about English as a lingua franca and its value has specifically encouraged her to help her ESL students feel proud of their English, whatever their level is. And that's a really great outcome. I do hope your students, Bronwyn, appreciate that. And certainly it's true. Communication is the main point of ELF study, English as a lingua franca, and that idea that you shouldn't be ashamed of any amount of language knowledge you have. You should be proud of it and use it, with pride, and use it a lot and develop it, and make sure that you can communicate with people, and then you'll get the benefits of learning a language that so many of you talked about this week. So, thank you for all your wonderful comments and for sharing your experiences of teaching and learning. It's been another brilliant run of the course, and you've all been a key part of that in telling us everything and making us think about new things. The course runs till Sunday, and then it will be open for a little longer after that. At the end of this week, there is a step which gives you some ideas about how you can keep the conversation going and the study. The British Council has a Facebook page which you can join to keep talking to us. Please do join that. That particular Facebook page is open to all of the British Council MOOC learners, and so there are many millions of teachers and learners on there who can share experiences with you. We have another MOOC coming up soon from the University of Southampton, which you might be interested in. and that is English as a medium of instruction for academics. And we'd love to see you on that one too. That course is aimed at people who are teaching another subject, for example history or science or math, through the medium of English. So it's really a teaching skills course, and I think you'll find that really interesting and useful. So we'd love to see you on that course. Thank you very much for joining this course. Goodbye, and I hope we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.